Welcome back to my inner sanctum. I'm your hostess, Countess Elizabeth, mistress of the macabre. It might seem crazy now, but there was once a time when parents allowed their children to go to places on their own. They would allow their children to go walking alone to school or the shops. Today's case, my fiends, is one that made those times a distant memory as we cover the case of the missing Beaumont children. So, let us go to the land down under so we can explore our grotesque curiosity. Jane Beaumont, Arna Beaumont, and Grant Beaumont, or collectively known as the Beaumont children, were three Australian siblings who disappeared on January 26, 1966, Australia Day, from Glenaga Beach near Adelaide, South Australia. It is suspected that they were abducted and murdered. At the time of their disappearance, they were aged 9, 7, and 4 years respectively. On the day before the disappearance, in the midst of a summer heat wave, Jim Beaumont, their father, dropped the children off at Glenaga Beach. He then head off on a 3-day sales trip to Snowtown. Jane, who was 9, was the eldest child and was considered responsible enough to care for her 2 younger siblings. And given the social conditions at the time, their parents were not concerned about the trip. On the morning of January 26, 1966, which is Australia Day, the children asked their mother to visit the beach. As it was too hot to walk, they took a 5-minute, 3-kilometer bus journey from their home to the beach. They caught the bus at 8:45 a.m. and were expected to return home on the 12 noon bus. Nancy Beaumont, the children's mother, became worried, however, when the children did not return on either the 12 noon bus or the 2 p.m. buses. And when Jim Beaumont returned home early from this trip around 3 p.m., he immediately drove to the crowded beach. Unable to locate them, he returned together and they searched the streets and visited friends' houses. Around 5:30 p.m., they went to Glenaga Police Station to notify them of the disappearance. Police organized a search of the beach and adjacent areas based on the assumption that the children were nearby and simply had lost track of time. The search then expanded to the sandhills, ocean, and nearby buildings, with the airport, rail lines, and interstate roads being monitored too, based on fear of accident or kidnap. Within 24 hours, the entire nation of Australia was aware of the case. Within 3 days, on January 29th, the Sunday Mail led with the headline, "Sex Crime Now Feared," highlighting the rapidly evolving fear that they had been abducted and murdered by a sex offender. Despite this, the initial reward was only £250. Police quickly established that between them, the children were carrying 17 individual items, including clothing, towels, and bags, but none of these items were ever found. The Patahalonga boat haven was drained on January 29th after a woman told the police that she had spoken with the 3 children, who were similar in description to the Beaumont children, near the haven at 7 p.m. on January 26th. Police cadets and members of the Emergency Operations Group searched the area, but nothing was found. Police investigating the case found several witnesses who had seen the children in Collie Reserve near the beach, in the company of a tall man with fair to light brown hair and a thin face in his mid-30s, of a suntanned complexion and a thin to athletic build, wearing swimming trunks. The children were playing with him and appeared relaxed and to be enjoying themselves. The man also approached one of the witnesses, however, asking if anyone had been near their belongings as their money was missing. The man then went off to change while the children waited for him, and the group was seen walking together away from the beach sometime later, which the police estimated to be around 12:15. The Beaumonts described their children, particularly Jane, as shy. For them to be playing so confidently with a stranger seemed out of character. Investigators theorized that the children had perhaps met the man during a previous visit or visits and had grown to trust him. A chance remark at home, which seemed insignificant at the time, supports this theory. Arna had told her mother that Jane had got a boyfriend down the beach. Nancy Beaumont thought she meant a playmate and took no further notice until after the disappearance. A shopkeeper near Winslow's Bakery also reported that Jane had bought pasties and a meat pie with a £1 note. Police viewed this as further evidence that it had been with another person for 2 reasons. The shopkeeper knew the children well from previous visits and reported that they were never purchased a meat pie before, and the children's mother had given them only 6 shillings and 6 pence, enough for the bus fare and lunch, and not a £1 note. Police believed it had been given to them by someone else. According to an initial statement, the children were seen walking alone at about 3 p.m. away from the beach along Jetty Road in the general direction of their home. The witness, a postman, knew the children well, and his statement was regarded as reliable. He said that the children were holding hands and laughing in the main street. Police could not determine why the reliable children, already 1 hour late, were strolling alone and seemingly unconcerned. This was the last confirmed sighting of the children. The postman contacted police 2 days after his initial statement and said that he thought he saw them in the morning, not the afternoon, as he had previously previously said. The Beaumont children were reportedly sighted with a man at 3 p.m. on the day they disappeared by a local resident, Miss Daphne Gregory. She said the man carried an airlines bag, similar to one owned by Jane Beaumont. Several months later, a woman reported that on the night of the disappearance, a man, accompanied by 2 girls and a boy, entered a neighboring house that she believed empty. Later, she said she had seen a boy walking alone along a lane, where he was pursued and roughly caught by the man. The next morning, the house appeared to be deserted again, and she saw neither the man nor the children ever again. Police could not establish why she failed to provide this information earlier. Other reported sightings of the children continued for about a year after their disappearance. The case also attracted international attention. On November 8, 1966, Gerard Quasset, a parapsychologist and psychic from the Netherlands, was brought to Australia, causing a media frenzy. His search for the children proved unsuccessful, with his story changing from day to day, offering no clues. He identified a site in a warehouse near the children's home, and also near the Paringa Park Primary School, attended by Jane and Arna, in which he believed the children's bodies had been buried. At the time of their disappearance, it had been a building site, and he said that he believed that their bodies were buried under the new concrete, inside the remains of an old brick kiln. The property owners, who were reluctant to excavate on the basis of the psychic's claim, soon bowed to public pressure after publicity raised $40,000 to have the building demolished. No remains or any evidence linking to any of the Beaumont family were found. In 1996, the building identified by Quasset was undergoing partial demolition, and the owners allowed for a full search of the site. Once again, no trace was found of the children. About 2 years after the disappearance, the Beaumont's parents received 2 letters, supposedly written by Jane, and another by a man who said he was keeping the children. The envelope showed a postmark of Dandenong, Victoria. The brief notes describe a relatively pleasant existence and referred to, quote-unquote, the man who was keeping them. Police believed at the time that the letters could quite likely have been authentic after comparing them with others written by Jane. The letter from, quote-unquote, the man said that he appointed himself guardian of the children and was willing to hand them back to their parents. In the letter, a meeting place was nominated. The Beaumont's parents, following a detective, drove to the designated place, but nobody appeared. It was sometime later that a third letter, also purported to be from Jane, arrived. It said that the man had been willing to return them, but when he realized a disguised detective was also there, he decided that the Beaumonts had betrayed his trust and that he would keep the children. There were no further letters. In 1992, new forensic examinations of the letters showed that they were a hoax. Fingerprint technology had improved, and the author was identified as a 41-year-old man who had been a teenager at the time and had written the letters as a joke. Because of the time that had elapsed, he was not charged with any offense. In November 2013, excavation was initiated in the back of North Plimpton factory that had previously belonged to one possible suspect in the case, Harry Phipps. Further excavation at a slightly different location on the site was undertaken in February 2018. Nothing relevant was found. The excavation were based on 2 men reporting that as boys, they had been paid to dig a hole in the area around the time, and geophysical testing, which had identified anomalous disturbed soil. Animal bones were found, but nothing relating to the Beaumont children. Here are some of the possible suspects. Bevan Spencer von Einem was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1984 for murdering 15-year-old Richard Kelvin, son of an Adelaide newsreader, Rob Kelvin. Police and prosecutors publicly stated that they believed von Einem had accomplices and was possibly involved in additional murders. About the same time, police came to suspect von Einem of possible involvement in the Beaumont children disappearance. No accomplices were ever charged. Von Einem has refused to cooperate with investigators about his possible connection to other murders. During the investigation into von Einem, police heard from an informant identified only as Mr. B. He related an alleged conversation in which von Einem boasted of having taken 3 children from the beach years earlier and said that he had taken them home to conduct experiments. While von Einem was known to have frequented Glenica Beach to perv on changing rooms and was described as preoccupied with children, what argues against his involvement in the Beaumont case is that he was younger than the suspect seen with the children in 1966. The suspect was reported to be in his mid to late 30s, whereas von Einem was 20 or 21 at the time. Another suspect is James O'Neill. In the early 1970s, James O'Neill, who was jailed for life in 1975 for the murder of a 9-year-old boy in Tasmania, had told a station owner and several other acquaintances that he was responsible for the disappearance of the Beaumont children. In 2006, Neil lost an injunction in the High Court of Australia to stop the broadcast of a documentary called The Fisherman, which attempted to link him to the Beaumont case. Former Victoria detective Gordon Davey had spent 3 years speaking to O'Neill to win his confidence before filming for the documentary. Davey said that although there was no evidence to link O'Neill to the disappearance, he was persuaded that O'Neill was to blame. I asked him about the Beaumonts, and he said, "I couldn't have done it. I was in Melbourne at the time. That is not a denial." Later asked again if he murdered the children, he replied, "Look, on legal advice, I'm not going to say where I was or when I was there." After they interviewed him, police discounted O'Neill as a suspect in the Beaumont case. On April 22, 2007, a report in The Age suggested that the Beaumont children may have been killed by Derek Ernest Percy, Victoria's then longest-serving prisoner. Percy was in prison until his death in 2013 after being found not guilty by reason of insanity for the 1969 murder of Yvonne Toohey. The Age alleged that the evidence gathered by cold case detectives indicated he was a likely suspect for the number of unsolved child murders, including the Beaumont children. His insanity plea on the Toohey murder was at least partly based on his suffering of a psychological condition that could prevent him from remembering details of his actions. He was supposed to have indicated that he believed he might have killed the Beaumont children, as he was in the area at the time, but he had no recollection of actually doing so. On August 30th, 2007, Victoria Police successfully applied for permission to question Percy in relation to the Beaumont disappearance. In 1966, Percy was 17, and therefore seems to have been too young to have been the man seen with the Beaumont children. It is also unknown whether Percy would have had a car at the time. While the Beaumont children suspect is presumed by commentators to have had access to a car for facilitating a quick getaway and also for disposing of the children's bodies later. Percy was in prison from 1969 until his death in 2013, which means that he could not have been the abductor in another murder case known as the Oval case, whom many of the police who investigated both cases believe to be connected with the Beaumont disappearance. Another suspect is Harry Phipps, a local factory owner and then member of Adelaide's social elite. Phipps came to attention as a possible suspect after the publication of the book The Satin Man, uncovering the mystery of the missing Beaumont children in 2013. It was republished and then updated with new information in 2015. The book did not name the identity of the Satin Man, but his estranged son identified him soon after as a Satin Man and possible murderer. Phipps bore a substantial likeness to the police artist's impression of the man seen talking to the children on the beach. He was wealthy and was known to have been in the habit of giving out £1 notes. He was later alleged to have pedophilic tendencies and lived only 300 meters away from Glenaga Beach at the corner of Augusta Street and Sussex Street. In 2007, Phipps' son Hayden, who was 15 at the time of the disappearance, came forward to researchers with the claim that he had seen the children in his father's yard that day. Two other persons, youths at the time, said that they had been paid by Phipps to dig a 2 meter by 1 meter by 2 meter hole in his factory yard that weekend for unstated reasons. In November 2013, a 1 meter squared section of a factory in North Plimpton, which had been owned by Phipps, was excavated following new information about a possible involvement in the disappearance of the children. A ground-penetrating radar found one small anomaly, which can indicate movement or objects within the soil, but the dig found no additional evidence and investigations into the site were closed. On January 22, 2018, Adelaide detectives announced that they would return to the factory site and conduct further excavations after private investigations sponsored by Channel 7 Adelaide. The excavation on February 2, 2018 took 9 hours. Animal bones and general rubbish were found, but nothing related to the Beaumont case. The Beaumont case resulted in one of the largest police investigations in Australian criminal history. Well, that was truly a grotesque tale. It seems like the Beaumont children vanished into thin air. What I thought was crazy is how parents back then would just leave their children, with the oldest being 9, at the beach with no supervision and just expect things to be okay. I mean, from the research it said that this case changed the social climate in Australia. My research said that this case changed the social climate in Australia, and I think for the better because there are a lot of people who want to do harm to children left unsupervised. Well, whatever happened to them, may their souls rest in peace. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe, like, and share if you would also like to keep exploring our grotesque curiosity. We will meet again in the darkness of the night.